Hi, I'm Bob Butler from KCBS Radio. Welcome to a forum to discuss Measure I and Measure F, a pair of initiatives for the city of Martinez which will be on the ballot June 5th for the primary election. Today's forum is sponsored by the Contra Costa County Elections Division, the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, and the League of Women Voters of West Contra Costa County. We're recording these roundtables here in the studio of Contra Costa Television with some crew assistance from the city of Walnut Creek. The Measure I and Measure F will be considered by voters in Martinez and deal with deciding if and how open space should be developed and who gets final approval for any future development. The Measure I asks voters in Martinez if they want to create a protected open space and parks overlay designation and apply it to open space areas set in the city's plan and growth documents from 1973. Measure F asks voters if they wish to designate lands permanently as open space and park and recreation and require voter approval anytime there's a proposal to change those designations. The difference between the two measures is that Measure I refers to both public and privately owned land, while Measure F refers to just publicly owned land. Now, if both Measure I and Measure F are approved, the one with the most votes will prevail. Joining me for a discussion about Measure I and Measure F today is Martinez Mayor Rob Schroder and Tim Platt, who co-authored Measure I. Thank you both for joining me today. So we'll start with Tim, who's the proponent of Measure I. Why do we need Measure I?
Well, open space and parks are integral to quality of life in Martinez. And I want to clarify one thing. The Martinez Open Space and Park Protection Initiative that's been before the public for the last year and a half is now Measure I. So that's what we're talking about. The open space and parks that we treasure so dearly are under threat, and because of the growth in population and the ever increasing demands for more housing. And our city council has repeatedly voted to convert those open spaces to housing. And we believe that those decisions are too important to be made by just the 5 people on the city council. So we worked on Measure I over 2 years with environmental experts, with citizens, with civic leaders. We put together the initiative. It went before the public. Over 4,000 Martinez voters signed the petition to put our initiative on the ballot. And it has been put on the ballot as Measure I now. And Measure I is very simple. It covers all the open space and parks. It protects all the open space and parks in Martinez. And it does one simple thing. It says the approval of Martinez voters will be required anytime our city council votes to convert any open space or parks in Martinez to more intensive development, like developer projects for housing or for commercial uses. And that's the basis of Measure I. It's as simple as that.
Mayor Schroder, that sounds logical, but I understand the city council didn't like Measure I and went to court to block it.
Yeah, we felt that it was poorly written. It disagrees with itself in several areas. Tim mentioned that the city council has repeatedly rezoned open space for housing. That's not true. Anytime we have ever rezoned property, it's been private property, not public property. But yeah, we felt it, we were told by our experts that it was poorly written. It would be very, very hard to actually implement. And so we took it to the court to see what they would say. They did allow it to be on the ballot, primarily because they were looking at the process, which I understand, but they really didn't get into the meat and potatoes of the initiative. They said that will be decided after the election, assuming that Measure I passes. If it doesn't, then it comes off the calendar and the court doesn't have to deal with it.
So now you have Measure I and Measure F, which I understand the council put Measure F on the ballot.
We did.
Why put a competing measure on the ballot?
Because we wanted to show the citizens of Martinez that the city council wants to preserve public open space and public recreation areas. You know, there's all kinds of rumors flying around right now on social media about how Rankin Park and Hidden Lakes Park are under threat of being developed, which is completely false. So, yeah, we felt it was important to show the citizens that we're serious about open space and recreation lands, and that will never change.
So I understand that the Hidden Lakes is a big issue with Measure I supporters. Is that correct?
Not Hidden Lakes. Measure I protects all the open space and all the parks in Martinez. Measure F is really sort of a trick on the voters because Measure F leaves out the most important open space from protection. And that's the open space that developers want to buy so they can do big projects on. And then they just bring it to the city council, and the city council does a rubber stamp approval converting that land to the project. And then the project goes in, and then the people in the neighborhoods get to live with the impacts. And that's not right. We say that projects like that need to be approved by the populace, approved by Martinez voters, because those are the people who are affected by what happens when the project goes in. And the city has left that out. So it's sort of a trick on the city's part.
Well, but one of the biggest issues we have in the county is housing. There's not enough of it. And what we do have, it's too expensive. So what's wrong with having somebody that wants to come in and build more housing?
That's fine. Build, we would prefer and think it's logical to say to build on the land that is already designated for residential use. There's plenty of that land in Martinez that hasn't been developed yet, and that's where you go first. But our city council has a different opinion. The mayor said that they did not convert 3 open spaces to houses. They did. They voted to do it where Pine Meadows, they voted to do it for the Freitas open space, and they voted to do it for the Sino development by Nob Hill. And that's a pattern that's only going to increase as there's more and more pressure for housing demand in the community and in the overall society. And we need to have protections for those lands and let the people who are going to be affected by the impacts of those developments and who care about and get the benefits of open space and parks to at least have a say in those decisions. Having them decided by just 5 people on the city council is not the way to make those important decisions.
So, Mayor, how do you these 3 projects that Mr. Platt is talking about, is that true? Did the city council approve those projects?
Pine Meadow, what we did is we corrected a mistake that was made in the planning department from about 25 years ago. It should have been zoned R 7.5 somehow on the map. Somebody wrote permanent open space.
What does that mean, R 7.5?
Oh, it means single-family homes, basically, regular single-family homes with, maybe 10,000 square foot lots. So we corrected what we believed was a mistake on a 4-to-1 vote. So yes, there is a project that's going through the process right now. So that's what in my opinion, that's what's going on here. It's really about Pine Meadow. As far as the Sino project, there was a small strip of what was considered private open space that now has been pulled into a project that was we zoned it correctly. It was always zoned correctly. On the Freitas property, that has not been done yet, but there's a proposal in our draft general plan to change that to allow for, I think, 2 lots, and it's a very small piece of property. But my problem is that we're talking about private property rights. There are over 500 parcels, either in the city of Martinez, in the city limits, or in the sphere of influence that will be affected by this. And these are people that have homes in the Franklin Canyon, they have them Alhambra Valley and so on, and they have structures on them. And the way that Measure I is written, in our opinion, is that it just has discrepancies that there's no guarantees that those folks will ever be able to expand their homes or put an in-law unit. And so we're just trying to protect private property rights of citizens as well as protecting public open space and recreational areas.
So the public's, if I own a piece of property in Martinez, let's say I own, 100 acres, and I decide that, I'm tired of this property, it's prime for development, and I want to sell it to a developer, can I do that now?
Of course you can.
I can do that now?
Yes, yeah. Of course you can. But let me correct a misstatement by the mayor. It is public record that the city council voted to convert open space in Pine Meadow to housing. It is public record they did that for the Sino project, and it is public record they did that for the Freitas property. When he tells you the opposite, he is not telling you the truth. Now, let's talk a little bit about private property. Measure I in no way restricts any of the uses on private property that are allowed now, anywhere in Martinez. It is false to say that they do. Anything that a landowner can do on their property, whether it's open space or whatever, under the current general plan, they can continue to do under Measure I with no change whatsoever. So if a landowner owns open space and he's able to do cattle grazing on it or agriculture or recreation, that stays exactly the same, no change. if a limited amount of housing is allowed on open space now. If that's allowed, that stays the same under Measure I and does not change at all. The City Council is saying that Measure I restricts property rights, and that is false. That is not true. And with regard to the legal implications of that, the courts have seen some of the city's charges and ruled on them, and the court kicked them out of court. They said the city is wrong in those allegations. The allegations that are remaining will not be heard until after the initiative is in place, and we are very sure that we will be found blameless of them as well.
What you just said is that if I have a piece of private property and I want to sell 100 acres to a developer,
yes,
you're saying that I can do that now. But under
yes.
Measure I, it says if the City Council votes to do that, it has to go back to the voters for approval. So it does restrict that property owner's rights.
What happens now is that when a dramatic change to intensive development in a property occurs, it has to go through a process that ends up with the City Council voting to do a general plan amendment. And that's what would happen if someone wants to take open space and turn it into a housing development, for instance. And what we're saying is those decisions have been made by the City Council repeatedly in a way that does not reflect what is best for the community. And that those decisions are too important to be made by the City Council of 5 people. That in those decisions, the people who are most affected, the community at large, needs to have a voice. And that's what Measure I says. It says that when the City Council makes those votes, that the citizens of Martinez have to give their approval before that vote goes through.
Mr. Mayor, you said earlier that that was wrong. I wasn't sure what you were talking about.
Well, he's calling me a liar, and I'm not. But we disagree, meaning those folks that are supporting F, we disagree with the statement that that Measure I allows all of this further development on existing properties that have some development. The way we've read our Measure I is that it conflicts with itself. So what's going to happen is it's going to end up in court, I can guarantee you. So that's the reason that we really came up with Measure F, is to try to protect the open spaces, but have it so the private property rights remain. So if you have a home on a large piece of property, you want to put an in-law unit on it, you can do that. The way we read Measure I is that that's not the case. It's going to end up in court, or it's going to go to a vote of the people. There's 2 different sections, and I don't remember the sections, but that seem to disagree with each other, and it leaves it up in the air.
So Measure F was put on. I understand it was written very quickly to get on the ballot because you had to meet certain time limits to get it on the ballot. Correct?
Well, it depends on what you mean by quickly. The entire time, from the time we reviewed Measure I, and we started reviewing Measure I because we received 2 formal complaints, letter complaints. We were obligated to investigate it. We did. We had 30 days to do it. When we started that process, we started looking at, well, maybe we need to put another initiative on the ballot just in case, because we feel that it's going to be just a legal morass if it does pass, and it's going to end up in courts, and it's going to cost the city hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to implement it.
So both of them are going to be on the ballot, and we know that whichever one gets the most votes is going to prevail. You keep talking about the City Council doing this and doing that, but don't the voters vote for City Council members to make these kinds of decisions?
They sure do. This City Council has been opposed to Measure I from the very, very beginning.
I'm not talking about Measure I. I'm talking about, general plan, these kinds of things that happen in every city. You vote for people on the council to make these decisions.
Yeah, but in a democracy, people get to say there are certain things that we want to be handled differently. And this is one of those situations. The City Council has flaunted public opinion and where the public wants to go with these very, very important lands. It isn't as though we're talking about something simple. The open space and parks in Martinez are of incredible value to Martinez residents. And they, I believe, are going to say that they want to have a voice in making decisions on them. This is not something that's new or unusual. This has been done in communities around Martinez, around the county. It's been done in Hercules. It's been done in Moraga, in Dublin, in Livermore, in the county of Napa. So we're not doing anything more than saying this is such an important issue that we should not leave it in the hands of just our 5 city council members. And this council has worked as hard as they can to make that not come true. They talk about the fearing to spend money down the line. They have delayed every attempt for us to put this on the ballot. They have then sued us to try to keep us from getting this on the ballot. They then voted to spend up to $100,000 for high-priced San Francisco lawyers, $770 an hour, to try to keep us off the ballot. And then they actually broke the law. So we had to take them to court, and the Superior Court judge ordered the City Council to put our initiative on the ballot. And then they did their last trick. They put on Measure F to try to confuse the public.
We did not break the law. We did not.
Please.
We did not break the law. We were obligated to take it to court because of the way that it was written. The judge ruled on the procedural issues and said, let's just leave it on the ballot. All the problems that we brought up, they said, if it passes, then we'll deal with that later. And that's typical of judges. They want to clear their calendars. So, you know, and plus there were many people that signed the initiative, and the judge felt it was important to put it on the ballot. And so we're not trying to play tricks here. We're trying to clean it up. We're trying to set good public policy for the future of this city. And that includes, there's a lot of things you got to do when you're working for a city. It's more than just open space. It's roads, and it's water, and it's public police. There's a lot of things involved. So, yeah, people need a place to live, but I want to assure voters that, you know, we're not going to, in any event, to develop our parks. We just spent $30 million over the last 10 years improving all our parks and a library as well. So we're committed to open space in parks and recreation.
Mr. Platt, if Measure I fails, what happens next?
Measure I fails? I haven't looked at that. I think that there is good possibility that the voters of Martinez realize what's at stake here, and realize the importance of trying to take the extra step to protect their open space and parks. And let's be clear, under Measure I, it is perfectly probable that some open space and parkland may be converted in the future. Measure I is about the future. It's about 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. Measure I does not say that you can't convert open space or parks to housing or developer projects. What it says is that when you do that, you need to get the approval of Martinez voters. And that means you need to look carefully at whatever you're proposing rather than just doing what the developer wants you to do.
I go back to this issue of why people vote for a city council. You usually vote for people to make these kinds of decisions. I wonder whether all of Martinez feels the same way. You got enough signatures on the ballot. Mr. Mayor, I hear you both sides saying, well, they're not telling the truth, they're not telling the truth, but what do the voters need to take away from this? Because I think they're going to be confused when they see two things on the ballot that say basically the same thing with a couple of words difference.
Yeah, it can be confusing. We didn't put it on to be confusing. We put it on to enact good legislation. But you're right about as far as we're a representative democracy, and you know, as a city council, we make important decisions every single day. I don't see where the mistrust comes from. There are people that do and people that don't. I've been on the city council since 1996. I've been the mayor since 2002. And I've been reelected several times. So that tells me that a majority of the citizens of the city feel that we're doing a good job. So anyway, that's pretty much.
So why couldn't you have just let Measure I go, and then if it's approved, can't the council then put amendments to it to address the issues you're talking about?
No. It would have to go to court, and the court would have to make those. So if it does pass, it will then go back to court, and the judge will then decide some of the substantial measures, issues that we have brought up about discrepancies and so on.
Well, let's be a little clear on that. Measure I can be amended by a vote of the public.
Yes.
So Measure I is not cast in stone, but because initiatives show the will of the citizens themselves, they can't be changed by the city council. And indeed, that makes sense because we're doing something that the city council may not agree with, so they should not be allowed to just change it after it gets put in place.
And same with Measure F. If it passes, the city council cannot change any of that.
So it's
Only a vote of the people.
And it's going to be up to the citizens to decide whether this is important enough to have the ability for the public to overrule the city council's votes on converting open space or not. And that's what this is about.
So let's look 10, 15, 20 years down the road. If neither one of these measures was on the ballot, what would Martinez look like?
Well, yeah, 10, 15 years down the road, we're thinking about that all the time. We are pretty much built out. We have a few large parcels, one being Pine Meadow, another being Alhambra Highlands. In fact, that's the city council is currently working with the owner of that property to try to buy it, and that is beautiful open space and ridgelines above John Muir's home. But I would say in 15 to 20 years, we're talking about development in infill development in selected areas. You're looking at transit-oriented development around, say, the Amtrak train, Amtrak station. You've got to get people in higher density areas around transportation hubs like Amtrak. So I think you'll find more in the downtown area, and then also converting underutilized parcels that are currently either vacant industrial lots or even could be currently quasi-commercial, quasi-industrial, and have that converted over to more of a higher density transit-oriented and green housing. So that's where I see the future. But I don't see any changes in open space, public open space, parks and recreation. That'll never happen as long as I'm on the city council. And if these measures pass, obviously.
Platt.
Well, obviously, we believe that the city council will continue in their path to convert open space, private and possibly public open space, to more intensive development. And that's what we're trying to protect against. The track record of the city has been in that direction, the city council has been in that direction, and the pressures to do that are going to increase. And we're talking about significant pieces of land all over this city. There are about 400 acres of public open space, about 160 acres of parkland, about well over 400 acres of private open space, and that could make a significant difference in the quality of life and in what our Martinez offers to its citizens who live here if the city council is allowed to continue to convert. And we think with Measure I in place, what we will see is a lot lower conversion, a lot more preservation of the open space and parks that we value so much. And what conversion does occur will be conversion that has the developer thinking about not only his bottom line, but what he has to do to meet the needs of the community and the neighborhoods.
So we've looked at the future. What are some of the biggest problems that you see that could be overcome by Measure F?
You mean the problems in general for the city?
Correct.
I think what it'll do, it'll obviously make some folks feel more secure that the public open space and the parks and recreational areas are not going to be gobbled up by housing or even by any kind of commercial development. You know, we value our parks in this community. We have more parks than most communities around us. We have, I mean, like I said, we just put $30 million into our parks over the last 10 years. It's amazing that the citizens of Martinez voted during a recession to tax themselves to raise money for parks. I mean, it was a big surprise for a lot of us. But it's going to take away that issue. You know, in some respects, as the mayor, I don't see that it's necessary, but to give the residents of this community more security in that area, fine, that's why I signed the darn thing.
Measure F.
Correct.
Okay. Measure I, let's look at what city's going to look like without either one of those.
Without either one of those, I think you'll see a continuing conversion of open space, private and public, to more intensive development. I think the developers who work very well with our city council will continue to be able to go after that kind of land and use it and turn it into commercial and housing projects. I'd like to say a quick thing that I do agree with the mayor on trying to secure Alhambra Hills as open space. I am one of the founders of the group that pressured the city for years, the Alhambra Hills Open Space Committee, to move in that direction. And finally, about 3 years ago, the city started to move in that direction. Thank you. And I'm also the treasurer of the Measure H campaign that got that $30 million a bond issue passed, and we're proud of that also. We gave that money to the city for the city to spend.
I'm glad we have something that we agree on.
Yeah, I hear you.
We have to kind
I-
of find, we have to move on. Give us your pitch for the voters.
Well, Measure I is the citizens' initiative. Measure I does one simple thing. First of all, it protects all the open space and parkland in Martinez, not just leaving out the part that Measure F leaves out. Secondly, but most importantly, Measure I does this. It requires the approval of Martinez voters for any city council vote to convert any open space or park in Martinez to more intensive development like developer projects or commercial ventures. Measure I gives the people of Martinez control over those very important and essential assets and takes them away from the decisions of just 5 people on the city council. And I'd like to close, if I may, with a quotation from one of our renowned city leaders, Harriet Burt. During my long career in public service, I have walked every corner of Martinez. Residents everywhere praise our open space and parks and appreciate what they bring to their lives. To see more of them disappear would be a permanent loss to our neighborhoods. Measure I just makes sense. Please vote yes on Measure I, the citizen initiative, on June 5th. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, Measure F is simple and clear. It was placed on the ballot by the Martinez City Council to protect public open space and park and recreation lands, and to protect those lands from more intense development. Measure F does not change the use of these lands, it strengthens their protections. Measure F ensures that no privately owned parcels are affected, and there are over 500 of those that are privately owned that will be affected by Measure I. Measure F protects the city in 2 ways. It does not allow any changes in the public open space, recreational areas, or parks, and it also protects private property rights. The Martinez City Council has never given away or rezoned public open space, parks, and recreational areas. Measure I is confusing and contradicts itself in many areas. It will cost the city hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal costs if it does pass. Measure F is simple and clear, so on June 5th, please vote for Measure F.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Platt, that concludes our forum on Measures I and Measure F for the City of Martinez. For more information on this measure and all the candidates, visit website votersedge.org. To view this broadcast online, go to www.cocovote.us. I'm Bob Butler. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, vote on June 5th.